They told you that if you really cared, you'd fight harder, speak louder, make sure they understood exactly how you feel. But what if that's the very thing pulling them further away? What if every explanation, every plea, every attempt to fix is building a wall between you, brick by brick? The hardest truth in love isn't about how much you give. It's about what happens when you stop giving away the parts of yourself they've stopped valuing. There's a quiet power in doing nothing, not as punishment, but as a way of reclaiming your space. It's not silence that ends connection. It's the kind of noise that comes from never letting a moment breathe. Who are you when you stop performing for someone else's approval? When you stop chasing what isn't moving toward you? Because the truth is, you don't have to block them to protect yourself. You don't have to beg to be chosen. Sometimes the most magnetic thing you can do is stand so still in your own worth that they have to come closer to feel it. Quote, "The moment you stop running after them, they'll finally notice you are the place worth coming home to." When you've been caught in the loop of over-explaining or chasing, it's easy to believe that constant engagement is the only way to keep love alive. But often that urgency is a symptom of emotional flooding, when your body's stress response hijacks your ability to think clearly. In these moments, your nervous system is shouting, "Do something!" Well, the healthiest move is often to pause. Silence, when intentional, is not a withdrawal of love. It's a way to let both people's nervous systems reset so connection can happen without the static of reactivity. One of the most overlooked truths in relationships is how bids for connection work. A bid might be as small as a glance, a question, or a touch, but when we're over-exceptioning, we mistake absence of a response as a call to push harder. In reality, pushing harder when a person is emotionally flooded often causes them to retreat further. Here's your first aha moment. By pausing instead of pursuing, you create space for the other person to re-engage on their own terms. The second aha comes from love maps, Gottman's term for how well we know our partner's inner world. When you step back and stop flooding the interaction with your own anxiety, you can better notice where they are emotionally. You're not abandoning the map. You're stepping back far enough to read it correctly. Here's the behavior insight healing loop. Behavior, you stop messaging, calling, or over-explaining. Insight, you recognize that their distance is about their emotional state, not your worth. Healing, you learn to anchor yourself in self-soothing practices until the emotional climate is safe for reconnection. This is how dignity and emotional clarity are restored. Reframe the toxic pattern of thinking, if I don't keep trying, I'll lose them, into, if I keep over-puncturing, I'll lose myself. Self-soothing. Whether through a 20-minute walk, journaling, or mindful breathing, calms your physiological response so you can respond instead of react. This calm presence often does more to draw a person back than any words could. In the end, detachment in this sense isn't shutting the door. It's holding it open without standing in the threshold waiting. It's trusting that if the connection is real, they'll walk through it when they're ready, and you'll be there, steady, clear, and rooted in your own self-respect. She had been staring at her phone for over an hour, the screen lighting up only with notifications she didn't care about. A sale from her favorite store, a group chat she barely paid attention to. Not his name, not the one she was hoping for. Earlier that week, she had sent 3 long messages, each one softer than the last, each one an attempt to explain herself, to fix whatever invisible wrong had shifted the air between them. She reread them now, her stomach tightening at the memory of hitting send and waiting. Always waiting. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. She could hear her own breathing, quick and shallow, like she was bracing for something. She typed another message, short this time, then hovered over the send button. Her thumb lingered there before she slowly hit backspace. The words dissolved into nothing. She set the phone face down on the counter and closed her eyes. In that stillness, a whisper-like voice inside her finally spoke. What if the love you've been chasing is the love you were meant to give yourself? She stood in that thought for a while, feeling its weight. She realized she'd been performing not for applause, but for scraps of reassurance. She had made her emotional world dependent on the tilt of someone else's attention, and in doing so, she'd quietly erased herself. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was clean. She took a slow, steady breath and deleted the thread of messages, not to erase him from her life, but to remove the evidence of the version of herself who thought she had to beg to be kept. When she picked up her phone again, it was only to set it down across the room, away from reach. She made tea, she sat by the window, the city moved outside without her needing to chase it. She didn't get him back that day, but she felt herself return in a way that mattered more. And in that moment, she understood sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all, and mean it. Try this tonight. Before you respond to anything that triggers you, a delayed reply, a sarcastic comment, a perceived withdrawal, take a 60-second pause. Not the kind where you count and fume, but a pause where you actually breathe into your body and place a hand on your chest, feel the rise and fall. This slows down your heart rate and interrupts what Gottman calls emotional flooding, the state where your nervous system shifts into fight or flight and your ability to think clearly collapses. That minute is not about withholding, it's about giving yourself space to choose your next move from a place of stability, not survival. Another practice, and one that feels almost sacred, is to name what you feel in real time. Gottman's research calls this labeling emotions to reduce their intensity. If you feel abandoned, name it. If you feel humiliated, name it. The brain processes labeled emotions differently instead of being consumed by them. You start to observe them. This observation is the beginning of mastery. Instead of, I am devastated, you shift to, I'm noticing devastation. That slight distance is powerful. It allows you to hold the feeling without becoming the feeling. Here's a third tool, the 3-1 internal repair method. Every time you catch yourself spiraling into self-blame or fear, I must have done something wrong, maybe I'm not enough, pause and offer yourself 3 self-orations for every one trigger. I showed up with honesty. I am worthy of respect. I am allowed to rest. This isn't blind affirmation, it's repairing your emotional ecosystem. Just as Gottman's magic ratio shows healthy relationships thrive on more positive interactions than negative ones, your relationship with yourself needs the same balance. Finally, use this journal prompt once a week. What did I give this week that I did not receive in return? Write without editing. You're not creating a scorecard, you're creating awareness. When you see patterns of overgiving or over-supportioning, you start to understand that your worth is not in what you pour out, but in how you protect what's within. These tools aren't about changing them. They're about recalibrating you. So your silence, your choices, and your presence carry a weight that doesn't need to shout to be heard. You've been replaying the same conversation in your head, haven't you? The one where you tried to explain yourself again, the one where you hoped if you just found the right words, he'd finally hear you, finally see you, finally choose you. But the truth is, he's not listening for you. He's listening for confirmation of what he already believes. And you've been working overtime to rewrite a story that was never yours to control. There's a moment in every woman's life when she realizes the exhaustion isn't coming from what he's doing, it's coming from what she's trying to keep alive. That's when silence stops feeling like loss and starts feeling like oxygen. What if you weren't too much, just unprotected? What if every time you felt ignored, it wasn't proof you were unlovable, but a signal that you've been giving love without boundaries? That realization will make your chest tighten, not from fear, but from the rush of finally telling yourself the truth. Here's the goosebump moment. The day you stop begging for scraps, the hunger goes away, not because he started feeding you, but because you learned to feed yourself. You start making choices not to provoke a reaction, but to protect your peace. You stop tracking whether he notices your absence because you've started noticing your own presence. Detachment is not abandonment. Detachment is saying, I release you to be who you are, and I return to who I am. Silence is not a weapon. It's a homecoming. It's standing in your own living room, in your own mind, and realizing, I've been gone for years, and I'm finally back. And carry this forward. When you stop fighting for a place in someone else's life, you make room to stand fully in your own. And from there, love, the real kind, doesn't have to be chased. It arrives because it recognizes you. You began this listening for an answer, maybe even for permission, to stop fighting for what hasn't been given freely. You thought that if you explained enough, loved enough, or stayed long enough, it would prove your worth. But now you see it. The exhaustion wasn't because you were unworthy, but because you were overgiving in a place that couldn't hold it. Mm-hmm. The wound you carried into this moment has shifted. It's no longer a question of, what's wrong with me? But a quiet knowing, there was nothing wrong with me at all. You are not someone who needs to perform for connection. You are someone who gets to choose where your energy lives. And so you let the noise fade. You don't block to punish. You don't beg to prove. You stand in the space you've reclaimed, breathing in the weightlessness of not needing to be chosen to feel whole. Stillness isn't what happens when they stop talking. Stillness is what happens when you finally start listening to you.